The nanny was fired for stealing until the millionaire's daughter revealed the truth. The nanny was fired without reason until the billionaire's daughter revealed something that left him in shock. Emma Parker stood at the service entrance with her suitcase in one hand and her shattered heart in the other. 3 years. 3 years caring for that child as if she were her own flesh and blood. And now they were throwing her out without any explanation. Tears streamed down her cheeks as the afternoon sun warmed her back, but inside Emma felt a cold that tore her in two. "Why?" she whispered to herself, looking one last time at the Montgomery mansion that had been her home for so long. No one gave her an answer. She only received an envelope with her severance pay and a cold order from Mrs. Henderson, the head housekeeper. "Mr. Montgomery wants you gone today." Emma didn't even have a chance to say goodbye to Lily, the 5-year-old girl who asked her to sing every night before bed. She walked toward the exit with slow steps, dragging not only her suitcase but also the memories of each morning preparing Lily's favorite breakfast, of each afternoon in the garden chasing butterflies, of each night drying tears when the little girl missed her mother. Catherine, Lily's mother, had died in a car accident when the little girl was only 2 years old. Since then, Emma had become her refuge, her comfort, the female figure who filled that enormous void, and now everything was vanishing like smoke through her fingers. James Montgomery stood by the window of the second-floor office, his dark eyes following every step Emma took as she crossed the garden toward the main gate. His jaw clenched, his hand tightening into a fist at his side. Somewhere deep inside him, something was screaming that this was a terrible mistake, that he was destroying the last good thing left in this house. But Victoria's words kept echoing in his mind like a poison he could not shake. That morning, Victoria had come into his office with a grave expression and a gold watch in her hand. Catherine's watch. The gift Catherine had given him on the birthday of their wedding year, the object he cherished more than any of his possessions. Victoria claimed she had found it in Emma's pocket while Mrs. Henderson was checking the staff's personal belongings, as required by the monthly regulations. "I hate to say this, James," Victoria had said in her perfectly measured, worried tone, "but a girl with that kind of background isn't suitable to care for a child with Lily's status. You understand? People like her? They're always looking for a way to climb." She paused, letting her gaze linger on his exhausted face. "Besides, I've noticed the way Emma looks at you. It's inappropriate, James. Completely inappropriate." At that moment, James had frowned. The way Emma looked at him? He had never noticed anything strange. The young woman was always respectful, devoted, and loving toward Lily. But Victoria persisted, slowly planting seeds of doubt in his weary mind. And James, after 3 years of being drained by work, endless meetings, and the gnawing loneliness that had consumed him day by day since Catherine passed away, no longer had the strength to question, to investigate, or to defend. Victoria had appeared 6 months earlier, introducing herself as an old friend of Catherine from their university days. She brought sympathy and support at a time when he was at his weakest. Gradually, Victoria took her place in his life, offering advice, subtly criticizing Emma, sowing doubts that he, in his exhaustion, swallowed little by little. So when Victoria placed the gold watch on his desk that morning, when she looked at him with eyes full of regret and said, "I think you know what must be done, James. For Lily," he signed the dismissal papers without hesitation, without asking a single question, without giving Emma a chance to explain. Now, watching Emma disappear beyond the iron gate, James felt a sharp pain in his chest that he could not name. Guilt? Regret? He shook his head and turned away from the window. He had a meeting in an hour and could not afford to be distracted. But as he sat down in the leather chair behind his desk, the image of tears streaming down Emma's face continued to haunt him relentlessly. Lily sat on the wooden floor of her bedroom, clutching tightly the white stuffed rabbit that Emma had given her for her 4th birthday. Her big, round eyes were fixed on the door, waiting for the familiar footsteps she knew would never appear again. Lily did not understand. She did not understand why Emma had left without saying goodbye. She did not understand why her father would not let her go downstairs to see Emma one last time. She did not understand why Miss Victoria kept smiling all morning while drinking coffee in the kitchen. "Emma will come back," the little girl whispered, hugging the stuffed rabbit closer to her chest. "She always comes back." But the hours passed, and Emma did not return. Night fell over the Montgomery estate, and a strange woman appeared in Lily's room. She had a stern face, rigid features, and a voice as cold and sharp as a blade. "Get into bed now," the woman ordered, without a trace of gentleness. "It's late." "Where is Emma?" Lily asked, her eyes shimmering with tears. "I want Emma to sing me to sleep." "Your former nanny no longer works here," the woman replied coldly. "I am your caregiver now. Go to sleep." Lily cried silently for hours that night, soaking her pillow with tears that no one came to wipe away. There was no lullaby, no bedtime stories, no one to hold her and tell her that everything would be all right. 2 weeks passed like a prolonged nightmare. James began to notice the changes. Lily no longer ran through the hallways. Her bright, ringing laughter had vanished completely. She did not ask to go to the park, did not want to play in the garden, and did not even run to greet her father when he came home. Lily had become a silent shadow, eating only a few bites before pushing her food away, answering with single words when spoken to. The new nanny, a woman introduced by Victoria, assured James that everything was fine. "The child simply needs discipline and structure, Mr. Montgomery. I am handling it well." But James knew his daughter. He knew that look, the empty eyes, devoid of life. Something was terribly wrong. One evening, after a dinner during which Lily barely touched her favorite soup, James decided to go upstairs to put his daughter to bed. It had been months since he had done this, always leaving the task to others while he buried himself in contracts and deals. But tonight, seeing Lily's small, pale face, he knew he had to do something. "Shall I read you a story?" James asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. Lily shook her head, clutching the stuffed rabbit tightly. "Emma used to sing," she whispered softly, "every night." The name Emma struck James like a slap to the face. This was the first time in 2 weeks that Lily had mentioned Emma. "Lily?" James said gently, feeling his heart tighten. "Emma had to leave, sweetheart." "But I don't like the new nanny." Lily interrupted her father with a firmness rare for a 5-year-old. "She is very harsh, and Miss Victoria is mean too." James flinched at the decisiveness in his daughter's voice. "Why do you say that, my love?" Lily stared at him with the big, round eyes she had inherited from Catherine. In that moment, she seemed to be weighing whether she could trust her father or not. Finally, Lily leaned slightly toward James and whispered in his ear, "I saw Miss Victoria that day, Daddy, when Emma was cleaning your office." James felt as if the blood in his body had stopped flowing. "What did you see, Lily?" "Miss Victoria came in and put your watch into Emma's pocket." Lily's voice trembled. "The gold watch Mommy gave you. Then she told Mrs. Henderson that Emma was a thief." James's world froze. His heart stopped for a second, while his mind struggled to process the words he had just heard. Catherine's watch. The watch Victoria had claimed was missing and was later found in Emma's belongings during a routine inspection. That was the very reason he had fired Emma immediately, without giving her a chance to defend herself. "Are you sure about what you saw, Lily?" James asked, his voice shaking so badly he barely recognized it as his own. "Yes, Daddy," Lily nodded. "I was playing hide-and-seek under your desk. I saw everything. Miss Victoria put the watch there. Emma didn't touch it at all." James felt as though the ground were opening up to swallow him whole. He had dismissed an innocent woman. He had torn away from his daughter the one person who had filled the void left by her late mother. He had trusted Victoria blindly, without asking a single question. "Why didn't you tell Daddy sooner?" James asked, taking his daughter's small hands in his own. Lily's eyes filled with tears. "Because Miss Victoria told me that if I told anyone, she would make Emma go to prison. I was so scared, Daddy. But I miss Emma so much. I want her to come back." Rage began to boil through James's veins. Victoria had been manipulating him from the very beginning. She had approached him 6 months earlier, introducing herself as Catherine's old friend, offering support and companionship. Slowly, she had taken over space in his life, suggesting changes, subtly criticizing Emma, planting seeds of doubt. And he, like a fool, had fallen into every one of her traps. He rose from the bed, determination clear on his face. He needed to find Emma, apologize to her, beg her to come back. But first, he had to deal with Victoria. "Listen to me, sweetheart," James said, gently stroking Lily's face. "You did the right thing by telling me. Emma will not go to prison, and Victoria will never be allowed near you again. I promise." Lily nodded, a glimmer of hope shining in her tear-filled eyes. "Will Emma come back, Daddy?" James took a deep breath. He didn't know where Emma was. He didn't know whether she would want to return after the way they had treated her. But he would do everything he could to find her. "I will find her," he promised, "and I will bring her back." That night, after Lily finally fell asleep with a small smile on her lips, James went down to his office and dialed his lawyer's number. He didn't care what time it was. He needed to act immediately. "David," James said firmly the moment the call was answered, "I need you to investigate Victoria, everything, her past, her connections, her intentions, and I need you to find the current address of Emma Parker, my former employee. Urgently." On the other end of the line, David Chen, his longtime friend and lawyer, replied in a serious tone. "Give me 24 hours. How serious is this, James?" James looked out the window, toward the dark garden where he had seen Emma play with Lily so many times. "I've made the worst mistake of my life, David, and I need to fix it before it's too late." The next morning, as the first light of dawn broke, Victoria walked into the mansion with her usual confident smile. But that smile froze when she saw James waiting in the hall, his face icy cold. "We need to talk," James said, his voice low and dangerous. "James, good morning." Victoria tried to maintain her composure. "What is this about?" "I know what you did." James stepped forward, his eyes burning. "I know you put the watch into Emma's pocket. I know you orchestrated everything." Victoria's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about. Who told you these lies?" "My daughter. She saw everything." Victoria scoffed, letting out a harsh laugh. "A 5-year-old child? You believe a child over me?" "I trust my daughter more than someone who has lied to and manipulated me from the very first day," James replied coldly. "I want you out of my house. Right now." "You'll regret this, James Montgomery," Victoria shouted, her perfect mask finally cracking. "You throw me out for a cheap nanny, you'll pay for this." James signaled to the security guards waiting by the door. "Escort this woman out, and make sure she is never allowed to return." As Victoria was dragged out of the mansion amid curses and threats, James felt a weight lift from his chest. But the work was not done. Now he had to find Emma and beg for the forgiveness he knew he did not deserve. Emma woke to the sound of church bells nearby. The small room she rented downtown smelled of dampness and toasted bread from the bakery downstairs. It was a completely different world from the Montgomery mansion, but at least she had a roof over her head, thanks to the small severance pay she had left. She sat up on the edge of the bed and looked at her hands. These were the hands that had brushed Lily's hair every morning, that had made hot chocolate for her, that had held her when nightmares struck. Now they were empty. 2 weeks had passed since the day she was fired, and the pain was still as raw as it had been on the first day. It wasn't just the loss of her job that broke Emma. It was losing Lily. The little girl had become the reason Emma woke up every morning, the light that brightened her gray days. And then, without warning, they had torn the child out of Emma's life. Worse than everything else was the accusation. A thief. The word still burned inside her. Emma had never taken anything that didn't belong to her. Her mother, who had passed away when Emma was 18, had taught her that honesty was the only thing the poor could hold on to, something no one could steal from them. And now they had stained that honor with a lie she could not wash away. That morning, Emma walked to the farmer's market where she had just found a job as a kitchen assistant at a small cafe. She was arranging pastries in the display case when a familiar voice made her turn around. "Emma, is that really you?" It was Martha, one of the Montgomery household cooks, a 50-year-old woman with the kindest heart Emma had ever known. "Martha," Emma whispered, feeling her throat tighten. The woman hurried over and pulled Emma into a tight embrace. "Oh, my dear, I've been looking for you everywhere. No one would give me your address. That snake Victoria forbade all of us from contacting you." Emma stepped back slightly, confused. "What's going on, Martha? How is Lily?" Martha's face darkened. "She's doing terribly, Emma. Not eating, not playing, not talking. She stays in her room all day, hugging the stuffed rabbit you gave her. It breaks my heart to see her like that." Tears began streaming down Emma's cheeks, unstoppable. "I miss her so much, too. They didn't even let me say goodbye." Martha glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "Listen, there's something you need to know. Late last night I overheard Mr. Montgomery talking on the phone in his office. He was furious. He mentioned your name several times and said something about a trap and a watch." Emma's heart started pounding. "A trap?" "I don't know the details, but it sounds like he finally realized that Victoria set you up. This morning, before I left, I saw him throw Victoria out of the house. There was shouting, threats, total chaos. That woman swore she'd get revenge, but he called security to drag her out." Emma didn't know what to feel. A small spark of hope flared in her chest at the thought that her name might finally be cleared. But at the same time, the pain of being treated like a criminal remained raw and unhealed. "And now what?" Emma asked, more to herself than to Martha. "Now Mr. Montgomery is looking for you," Martha replied, taking Emma's hand. "His lawyer, Mr. David, came by this morning asking about you. It seems they're desperate to find you." Emma stood frozen in the middle of the noisy market, a tangled, nameless mix of emotions rising inside her. Hope, anger, fear, all of them wrapped tightly around her heart. Emma left the market as the sun began to sink toward the west. The narrow streets were painted in shades of amber, the vendors' calls fading into the distance, but her mind was in chaos. Martha's words kept echoing in her head. "Mr. James is looking for you." She did not know what she was supposed to hope for. An apology? Compensation? Or just a belated explanation to soothe the conscience of a powerful man? Emma had just turned onto the street leading to Doña Rosa's house when a sleek black car slowly pulled up along the curb. Her heart tightened. A vague sense of dread made her steps falter. The car door opened. James Montgomery stepped out. His tall, familiar figure was there, but his face no longer belonged to the man she once knew. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His suit was lightly wrinkled, and in his gaze there was no longer cold distance, but something fractured. "Emma," he said hoarsely, "please, I need to talk to you." She remained still, her hands clenched until they turned white. Days of restraint, nights spent questioning what she had done wrong, everything surged up at once. "What do you want, Mr. Montgomery?" Emma replied, her voice calm to the point of coldness. The unfamiliar form of a dress rose like a wall between them. James swallowed. "I know I don't deserve even a minute of your time, but I need you to know. I know the truth now. I know Victoria set you up." Emma let out a short, dry laugh, devoid of any warmth. "And what does that change?" she asked. "Does it erase the 2 weeks I lived like a criminal? Does it erase the nights I lay awake wondering what I had done wrong? Does it give me back the chance to say goodbye to Lily?" James lowered his head. Her words weighed heavier than any accusation. "No," he said quietly. "Nothing can erase that. I have no excuse. I trusted the wrong person, and I hurt the people who least deserved it." "The people?" Emma repeated bitterly. "Lily is the one who was hurt. I was just a nanny who could be replaced." "No," James lifted his gaze, steadier now. "You were never just a nanny. You were the one who kept my daughter smiling when I couldn't. The one who brought warmth back into this house while I let it drown in silence." Emma turned away, her throat tightening. She did not want to hear this. Not now. "How is Lily?" she finally asked, her voice trembling. "Not well," James sighed. "She hasn't been herself since the day you left. Lily was the one who told me everything. She saw Victoria put the watch into your bag." Emma closed her eyes. A sharp pain pierced her chest. That little girl had carried such a terrible secret in silence. "She wants to see you," James continued, stepping closer. "And I want to ask for a chance to make things right." Emma opened her eyes and looked straight at him. In that moment, she did not see a powerful employer, but a desperate father. "I will see Lily," she said slowly, "only to see her." Hope flickered in James's eyes, only to be extinguished by her next words. "But that does not mean I forgive you, and it does not mean I am coming back. Don't mistake that." James nodded without protest. "That alone is already more than I deserve." Emma stepped toward the car, her heart racing. She did not know where this decision would lead her. She only knew one thing. A child was waiting for her. And for that child, she was willing to step back into the place that had once shattered her. The car stopped in front of the mansion gates as the sky faded into the pale violet of twilight. Emma stepped out, her heart pounding so loudly it nearly drowned out the sound of the iron gate slowly opening. Everything looked the same, the neatly trimmed garden, the fountain sparkling under the lights, but she knew she was no longer the same person she had been 2 weeks before. They walked toward the front door. Mrs. Henderson, the head housekeeper, was waiting in the foyer, her face tight with worry. When she saw Emma, her eyes filled with tears. "Miss Emma," she whispered, "I am so terribly sorry. I should have protected your honor. I know you would never steal anything." "It's not your fault, Mrs. Henderson," Emma replied gently. "That woman deceived all of us." "Mrs." Henderson nodded gratefully and stepped aside to let them pass. They had not yet taken the first step up the stairs when a familiar voice rang out from above, clear and high enough to make Emma's heart seize. "Emma!" Lily stood at the top of the staircase in star-printed pajamas, her hair tousled, her eyes swollen from crying. The moment she saw Emma, her face lit up as if the whole world had suddenly returned to its proper place. "Emma!" Lily ran down the stairs so fast that Emma lifted her arms instinctively. The little girl leaped into her embrace, clinging to her neck as if afraid that letting go for even a second would make Emma disappear again. "I knew it," Lily sobbed. "I knew you would come back. Every night I asked Mommy to bring you home." Emma felt her heart shatter and mend in the same breath. She held Lily tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of strawberry shampoo, feeling the small body trembling in her arms. "I'm here, my angel," Emma whispered through tears. "I'm here." Lily looked up, her tiny hands cupping Emma's face, studying her as if afraid to miss a single detail. "Are you sad?" she asked. "Are you still mad at my daddy?" Emma glanced at James, who stood silently behind them, his eyes filled with tension and hope. She turned back to Lily and smiled gently. "I'm a little sad," she said honestly, "but seeing you makes me very happy." Lily tugged Emma toward her bedroom. "I have something to show you." She pulled a carefully folded piece of paper from beneath her pillow. It was a crayon drawing, 2 figures holding hands in a green garden, surrounded by bright butterflies. Above them, in crooked but clear letters, Lily had written, "Emma and me, forever." Emma could no longer hold back her tears. "This is the most beautiful picture I've ever seen," she said, her voice breaking. "May I keep it?" "Yes," Lily nodded brightly. "So you will never forget me?" "I could never forget you," Emma whispered. That night, Emma sat by the bed and sang Lily the familiar lullaby. Only minutes later, the little girl drifted into sleep, a small smile curving her lips. From the hallway, James watched the scene in silence, his throat tight. For the first time in a long while, he understood that some bonds do not require shared blood, yet they are powerful enough to change an entire life. When the door to Lily's bedroom closed softly, the hallway fell into silence. Warm yellow light spilled across the marble floor, stretching long, lonely shadows. Emma descended the stairs slowly, her heart still moving in rhythm with the steady breathing of the child who had just fallen asleep. At the foot of the stairs, James was waiting. "Thank you," he said quietly. "She hasn't slept well for days." Emma nodded, but did not reply. She did not want the fragile calm she had just restored in Lily's room to be disturbed by polite words. James led her into his study. The room was spacious, orderly, and cold, a place Emma had cleaned hundreds of times but had never truly entered as an equal. He gestured for her to sit, then poured himself a glass of water. "I don't know where to begin," James said after a pause. "I've practiced these words many times, but now that you're here, everything feels harder." Emma looked at him steadily. "Go on." "I was wrong," he began, his voice lowering, "not only because I believed Victoria, but because I did not have the courage to face the truth. I let exhaustion, loneliness, and the pain of losing Catherine blind me." Emma's hands tightened slightly. It was the first time Catherine's name had been spoken so directly between them. "I watched you care for Lily," James continued, "day after day. You filled the spaces I chose not to see, and I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" Emma asked softly. "Afraid that I was beginning to feel something I shouldn't," he admitted. "Not from you, from me. When Victoria planted doubt, I clung to it as an escape. I allowed you to be hurt because I was a coward." Emma stood and walked toward the window. Outside, the garden lay in shadow, a place that had once been filled with laughter. "The most painful part," she said without turning around, "was not being falsely accused. It was realizing that after 3 years I could still be pushed aside so easily." James rose as well. "You were never replaceable," he said firmly. "You are Lily's family, and this home's." A long silence followed, not heavy, but waiting to be filled with truth. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness," James continued. "I'm only asking you to come back and care for Lily, not as an employee, but as part of the family with a fair contract, real respect, and the right to be heard." Emma turned to face him. In his eyes there was no trace of the old pride, only sincerity and a quiet plea. "I need time," she said slowly, "to trust, to understand, and to make sure I don't lose myself again." James nodded. "You have all the time you need." Emma stepped out of the study with a decision not yet complete, but clear enough for that night. Behind the closed door, James remained still, knowing that this confession did not bring miracles, but it had opened a path toward healing. The days that followed passed in a rhythm that felt unfamiliar, yet not uncomfortable. Emma returned to the Montgomery mansion every morning, right on time as before. But everything had changed. She no longer felt as though she were stepping into someone else's house. No one gave orders. No one watched her. No one looked at her with suspicion. There was only Lily, running toward her the moment she heard the familiar footsteps, throwing her arms around Emma as if afraid that waiting even 1 second might make her disappear again. The little girl changed day by day. First, her smile returned. Then came the soft singing in the garden. Mealtimes were no longer silent battles. Lily finished her cake, asked for more milk, and told Emma small stories about school. The house that had once been drowned in silence began to echo again with the sounds of life. James watched it all from a distance. He kept his promise. He did not cross boundaries. He did not pressure her. He did not ask questions Emma was not ready to answer. Every conversation between them revolved around Lily, her sleep, her schoolwork, her tiny fears that Emma understood better than anyone. Yet there were moments when, even without words, feelings quietly grew. Like the afternoon, James came home earlier than usual and found Emma and Lily sitting on the grass, coloring in an old book together. Sunlight fell across Emma's face, and he suddenly realized how long it had been since he had felt such peace. Or the late evenings, after Lily had fallen asleep, when Emma lingered in the living room tidying up toys. James would pass by, pause for a few seconds, and simply say, "She laughed a lot today." "Yes," Emma would reply. She needed that. Nothing more, nothing less. Until one night, when the mansion had fallen completely silent, Emma went downstairs to get some water. Soft light spilled over the kitchen counter, and she was surprised to find James sitting there, a long cold cup of coffee in front of him. "Can't you sleep?" Emma asked, stopping at the doorway. James looked up with a faint smile. "I'm used to it." The silence between them was no longer heavy. It felt like a safe space, one where neither of them had to pretend. "There's something I want to ask," James said after a moment. "Do you ever think about what I said that night?" Emma tightened her grip on the water bottle. Of course she did. His words had followed her through countless sleepless nights. "I think about many things," she replied. James stood and stepped closer, still keeping a respectful distance. "I'm not asking you for an answer right now. I just want you to know that, if you allow it, I want to learn how to begin again, one step at a time." Emma looked at him seriously. "If we try," she said slowly, "it has to begin with trust. No secrets, no decisions made for me. If you doubt me, you come to me first." James nodded without hesitation. "I promise." A quiet moment passed. Then James extended his hand, not rushing, simply waiting. Emma looked at it, felt her heartbeat slow, and finally placed her hand in his. Their first kiss happened in silence, gentle, cautious, like a promise that did not yet need words. And upstairs, Lily slept peacefully, smiling in her dreams as the broken pieces of a family slowly began to find their original shape again. Happiness, when it first begins to bloom, is far more fragile than people realize. One quiet afternoon, while James was at the office and Lily sat in the living room working on her homework with Emma, the doorbell rang, cutting through the rare peace that had settled over the house. Emma looked up instinctively. A vague sense of unease ran down her spine. "Elena, could you please open the door for me?" Emma said, keeping her voice calm so Lily would not notice anything was wrong. A few minutes later, Elena returned. Her face had gone pale, hesitation visible in her eyes. "Miss Emma, there is a man asking to see you." "Who is he?" Emma asked, her heart beginning to race. Elena took a deep breath. "He says, he is your father." The world around Emma seemed to freeze. Lily looked up from her notebook, worry in her eyes. "Emma, are you okay?" "I'm fine," Emma said with a strained smile. "You keep working. I'll step outside for a moment." She stood, her steps heavy as she walked toward the foyer. And then she saw him. The man standing at the door was much older than the image Emma carried in her memory. His hair was streaked with gray, his face carved with deep lines of time, but those eyes exactly like hers, made it impossible for her to deny the truth. "Emma," he said, his voice trembling, "you've grown so much. You look just like your mother." "You have no right to mention my mother," Emma replied coldly. "Why are you here?" The man lowered his head. I've been looking for you for many years. When I learned that your mother had passed, It's too late," Emma cut in, her hands clenched tightly. "Where were you 16 years ago, when my mother worked 2 jobs to raise me, when she was terribly ill but still didn't dare to rest?" Each word struck like a blade, yet Emma did not stop. The years of abandonment, the nights she had heard her mother crying in secret, everything surged out at once. The sound of a car engine echoed outside the gates. James stepped inside and froze at the sight before him. He immediately moved to stand beside Emma, protective but not imposing. "What's going on?" he asked quietly. The man lifted his gaze. "My name is Rafael Morales. I'm Emma's father." James looked at Emma. She gave a very slight nod. "I think you should leave," James said firmly. "Your presence is hurting Emma." "Please give me one chance," Rafael pleaded. "Just one conversation. If afterward she wants me gone forever, I will go." Emma turned away, her heart aching. She wanted to scream that he did not deserve anything, yet deep inside, another part of her trembled with questions that had never been answered. "I will not speak with you today," she said. "Please leave." Rafael nodded, disappointment etched clearly on his face. "I'm staying at the Central Hotel, room 203, if you change your mind." When the door closed, Emma stood motionless. Then the tears came, unstoppable. James wrapped his arms around her, not questioning, not advising, simply being there. "You don't have to face this alone," he whispered. "I'm here." In that embrace, Emma understood that the past, no matter how deeply buried, will always find a way back. And this time she would have to face it, not only for the man who had once left her, but for her own peace of mind. That night Emma hardly slept at all. She lay on her side by the window, watching the dim garden lights where Lily had once run, and laughed. The image of Rafael Morales, the man who had left her 16 years ago, kept returning to her mind. It was no longer the fierce anger she had imagined, but a vast, cold emptiness. Near 3 a.m, Emma slipped out of bed and went downstairs to the kitchen. The soft light was already on. James was sitting there as if he had known she would come. "You can't sleep," he said quietly, sliding a cup of hot tea toward her. "I thought you might not be able to either." Emma sat down, wrapping both hands around the cup. The warmth spread slowly, yet it could not reach the deepest place in her heart. "I don't know if I have the courage to listen to him," she whispered. James took her hand, not squeezing it, just enough to remind her that she was not alone. "Whatever you choose," he said, "I'll stand by you. But if you still have questions, listening may be the only way to close the past." The next morning, after taking Lily to school, James drove Emma to the Central Hotel. Room 203 was small and modest. Raphael opened the door almost immediately, his eyes red from lack of sleep. Their conversation unfolded slowly, filled with heavy silences. Raphael spoke of old debts, of threats, of being forced to leave in order to protect his wife and child. He opened an old box. Inside were dozens of letters that had never been sent, and records of the money he had quietly sent through intermediaries for years. Emma read each letter, tears falling onto the crooked lines filled with remorse and love. The wall of resentment she had built for 16 years finally began to crack. "I forgive you," Emma said, her voice trembling. "Not to forget, but so that I can have peace." Raphael held his daughter tightly. James stood nearby in silence, feeling a circle of healing finally close. In the days that followed, the Montgomery home filled with warmth. Lily quickly began to see Raphael as a gentle grandfather. The little girl laughed more than ever before. One quiet evening in the garden, beneath the magnolia tree, James offered Emma a simple ring. "I don't promise a perfect life," he said, "only that I will always listen, respect, and love you." Emma glanced toward the window, where Lily was peeking out with a radiant smile, then nodded. "Yes," she said, "I will." Beneath the starlit sky, 3 people who had once carried the deepest fractures finally found a way to choose love, not because they were perfect, but because they were willing to stay and make things right. And sometimes that is the most beautiful ending of all.